Lives retro now? Lives are pretty retro. Because when you think about it, they're just kind of like, kind of stupid in most cases. Where realistically all it's doing is like, making it so if you fail enough time, you just have to do the same stuff all over again. Which like, unless you're specifically trying to self-impose a challenge like that on yourself, just kind of feels like a waste of time. So most games have moved away from them. I think the only situation where I still kind of like them is, I think, like the Mega Man games? Because what they'll do is, like, every time you start from, like, fresh from a continue, you have 2 lives. And the stages are short enough, and you can pick them, like, in any order you want and stuff. That it kind of feels, like, appropriate, like, oh, you at least have to get through this stage, you know, in a handful of tries. You can't brute force it, but also the stages are only so long that it's not that all of an order, as opposed to something like some older games where it would be like, oh, what's that? You lost all your lives on the second to last stage? Well, now you have to start the whole game over. And in a game like this, it almost makes no sense. Like, you die and then you just have to, like, walk back to the stage, and it's like, oh, okay. And in fact, even back in the day, Banjo-Tooie, I think, got rid of the life system because they realized how pointless it was. I feel like lives, like, once the console generation came around too, almost turned into more of like a lot of the times games would just have them, because they would have them and they would have really hard sections of the game. So if you rented the game, it would be more likely that you'd have to rent it out more than once. And you couldn't just beat it in one, like, you couldn't rent it for a weekend and beat it by the end of the weekend, because there'd be really hard sections that would drain your lives. Is there something in a game you were scared of as a child that you still have memories of? I'm trying to think of, like, really, really specific things. I definitely have, like, a lot of, like, the common answers, like the stuff in Super Mario 64, like the underwater stuff in Sonic. I know one. When I was growing up, I could not beat... In Ocarina of Time, I couldn't do the Shadow Temple, the Under the Well segment, and I think there was... I want to say I had to have my older sister also beat the Spirit Temple for me. I could be wrong about the Spirit Temple, but I definitely remember I could not at all handle the spooky vibes of the Shadow Temple and the Under the Well segment. Oh! I don't know, going back to something way earlier. Whoop! Something that used to scare me as a child when it came to games. Have you ever heard of the arcade game Sinistar? Because I used to have, I think it was like a Sega Genesis, like 5 arcade games in one kind of package, like whatever the heck it was. And there was a game on it called Sinistar that I don't even think I could explain. I think it's honestly better if I just bring up some, like, footage of it in a second. So it was just like this weird little space game where you were going around. I think you were supposed to, like, I didn't even know what the goal was growing up. Where I think you're, like, collecting resources for points or something. All the sound effects are horrible and, like, clip really loud, which was its own kind of unsettling. I'm gonna guess that this is where the voice comes in. Beware, I live. Suddenly, you start hearing that, and then this horrible spaceship thing starts flying around everywhere trying to kill you. And my little kid brain could not handle this growing up. Or in the Discord, this is one of your favorite childhood games. Was this the one that really got you into gaming as a hobby? It was probably one of the bigger ones that, like, opened up the magic of gaming a little bit more. Because, like, this game is, like, this and the sequel are just very, very cool in the way that they build their worlds. That was, like, that's still very awesome to explore nowadays, but as a kid was, like, mind-blowing how connected everything felt and how many little secrets were all over the place and stuff. It's far from the first game I played, though. Growing up, I actually lucked out quite a bit, where I think my brother had an N64 and just kind of gave it to me because he didn't care about it anymore. And then, I want to say it was like his my brother's friend also had like a Genesis and an SNES, or maybe we had the SNES, and my brother's friend had the Genesis that he like gave to me for my birthday one year or something. I don't know. I ended up just running into like just enough retro consoles that I definitely had the hobby in my life since I was like itty bitty. And I want to say that the first game that I played was either The Lion King or Sonic 2 for the Genesis, I want to say. If I were to pick like a couple other games that like kick-started me into loving the hobby even more, it would probably be Sonic 2, just because I like that game a lot. It was one of the first games that I played that had like music that I absolutely adored, style that I absolutely adored. It was a little bit more grand because of how much more action-focused it was compared to a lot of games at the time. And then I think Secret of Mana was the other big one, because that was the first big like action RPG that had a lot going on in the background for it. Like there's a particularly big, long game that took a while to beat, and also had really good music. I think Banjo-Kazooie in particular just came to me at a good time though, because it was when I was like closer to like late grade school. So that's just kind of like once, you know, once you're that old, you have at least a little bit more of a head on your shoulders to really get lost in something like this, as opposed to when you're a little kid and it's mostly just shiny colors flashing in your face that you're trying to wrap your head around. When I was little, even seeing the crummy chibi plushes for this game sent my mind running in excitement over the idea. Yeah, that's definitely something that, like, once in a blue moon, there would be a franchise, like back in like the 90s and 2000s, that would get a ton of merch. Like, you could find an okay amount of, like, Pokemon and Sonic stuff. But a lot of franchises didn't get, like, particularly legit merch the way that they do today. And one memory that I always have of stuff like that is, like, there was a Games Workshop that was in the mall near where, or the mall that I could get to the easiest growing up had a Games Workshop. And sometimes they would play video game soundtracks. And I remember the one day where they played, like, I was like walking by them in the mall and heard Sonic Adventure 2 music. And it just got me like so excited as a kid. Because it just felt like something that was in, like, me and my friend's own little bubble. Because the world just didn't really care about giving that kind of stuff attention back in the day. Majora's Mask had advertised this turquoise wristwatch that probably just said Zelda or something. And my sister and I always wanted it, but it was one of those mail-in purchase things that were really overpriced. Yeah, I think the only thing like that I ever did, which there might have even been some special like gimmick to it where it didn't really cost money for some reason. I forget exactly what it was. But Nintendo Power did a thing at one point for a Super Mario Sunshine shirt. And I actually did do the mail-in for that because I wanted it really bad. You know, it's actually a random piece of merch I remember growing up. Like, speaking of just, like, it was so hard to find that stuff back in the day. Was, I used to own... Oh, actually, I wonder if I can find pictures of it. I keep... It's a very detour kind of stream. Ocarina of Time Kite. Yes, this was the one. They sold this at, like, a Walgreens near me. And I was like, holy shit, I want that kite so bad. Are you kidding me? And I think I ended up buying it and probably destroying it within like a year without even trying. But it was really cool and it got me really excited because stuff like that just felt like it didn't exist back in the day. I never watched Simpsons growing up either. I think that's mostly because I was like ignorant on different... Like, I basically didn't know anything that was outside of like the 3 cartoon channels and you know, I will explore a little bit more. The 3 cartoon channels and, like, Animal Planet and Discovery Channel were, like, the only channels I even knew about growing up. Which unfortunately means that I missed out on, like, a lot of, like, the, like, 4Kids, WB, all that stuff. What's the 3rd cartoon channel? I guess one of them's not technically a cartoon channel, but Nick, Cartoon Network, and Disney Channel was, you know, at least a fair mix. Technically, there was Toon Disney, but that hasn't been a thing for a while. I do remember being devastated when that went off the air, though. Especially because at the time, I didn't have any way to, like, explain it. Like, I don't think I really had the internet to, like, look into it. Not that I would have even known how to look into it. So, like, when Toon Disney just stopped existing, I just, like, I went to the channel and I was like, oh. I guess it's just not here anymore. I guess I just have to accept that now. I think Disney focusing on live action stuff makes sense for, like, making money, but I don't see how it appeals to people more broadly personally. I always thought the Disney shows were really weird growing up. I think most of the reason I thought the Disney shows were really weird growing up is because they felt like they were made for people who were at least upper middle class. Like, all of, like, the situations and stuff like that were all very, like... It was just, like, rich and famous people and people who had the money to do big, fancy things. And I always just felt very out of place watching them. Which is never a vibe that I got with, you know, things like watching Drake and Josh and iCarly growing up. My dog doesn't have a blog, I can't relate. I do think iCarly having a giant studio room as her bedroom was ridiculous. Yeah, the show's always had, like, at least a little bit of a weird vibe like that, but, Disney Channel was always way worse about it. And I think what made it feel that much weirder is that every single family that I knew growing up... What's it called? Every family that I knew growing up that was a little bit better off, like, all of their kids were obsessed with the Disney Channel and the Disney Channel sitcoms. And I was like, is this TV just not made for me the same way? It's not like I dislike watching it, but it always felt weird. I don't think I really like sitcoms in general, and all the ones for kids felt more obnoxious. I think the only sitcoms that I have particularly fond memories of, like, all the way through, and even rewatching it as an adult, I still think it holds up really well, is, I really like Drake and Josh. Like, as far as, like, sitcoms from my childhood that I remember laughing at, like, all the time and having a ton of quotable lines. And I went back to it with, like, adult brain expectations of what I would find funny. I think the only sitcom I remember being able to get into, like, kind of okay from the Disney Channel is, like, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. And I think that's mostly because the kids were just, like, little shits, and it was at least more entertaining than a lot of the stuff on the sitcoms that they used to have. And they were broke. It's so true. The hotel setting made it feel like it wasn't a show about broke people, but it was a show about broke people. You almost sound like the Adam guy from Your Movie Sucks But Less Monotone. When I first started streaming, and I usually never heard my voice played back to me. I kind of avoided it at all costs because I thought I hated it. It's at least part of the reason I started streaming. I wanted to get, like, more comfortable hearing that stuff, and I guess with my voice in general, because I didn't know, I don't know. I felt like I had, like, weird vocal tics, and I kind of wanted to hear how they actually panned out, like, listening back on them. Oh, yeah, when I first heard when I first, like, listened back on a VOD, that was actually one of the first things that came to my mind, was that I sounded like him. 6'3", that's all. I did, like, when I decided to make the Squirrel Sona, I did think that there was kind of, like, a almost funny, like, gentle giant irony to the fact that because I basically made my Sona look like what I actually look like for the most part, minus the squirrel part. You know, I kept my height the same, and then obviously when I'm doing the streaming, like, you're seeing this, you know, silly, soft squirrel and hearing my voice. And it's just kind of funny that it's, like, you know, very tiny, normally squeaky animal being 6'3" and then having kind of a deep voice. Being the little big spoon. That's exactly. What's the one game on any console you love to death and I feel is underrated? I think my go-to, like, soft spot for a game to mention is one that I've actually streamed a couple times and will probably stream again because I want people to be more and more aware of its existence, is the Afro Samurai game that was for PS3 and 360. And I mostly say it's underrated because I think, like, as a game, it's kind of like an action game. I want to use the words like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, that kind of thing. But the combat itself is, like, pretty low-key, like, especially compared to those games that are, like, really refined when it comes to that stuff. But the vibes of that game, the music of that game, everything about that game, the art style is just so perfect, and I love it to death so much. So even if it's, like, justifiably considered a hot 7 out of 10 a lot of the time, like from the reviews at the time, It's like one of my favorite games ever. I think the other game that I have an enormous soft spot for that everybody actually just hates is Sonic R. Sonic R is like one of my favorite. It's like one of my comfort games to go through because you can kind of 100% the game in like an hour, and like I have tamed the weird controls. And as a racing game, it's not good, but as like this weird single-player collectathon kind of, where you have to race through the stages, and it has this really unique control scheme, and the music is phenomenal. I've always considered it one of my favorite games of all time. Yoshi's Story, I haven't played that like since it came out. I remember liking the game at the time, but also I was a child, and the main complaint that I hear about it is that the difficulty is not quite there. I feel like this is something I've talked about before with Zelda games, and kind of can apply to a lot of different series as well, like Zelda, Kirby, stuff like that, is that I do not play those games for their difficulty, like, whatsoever. Like, it's just straight up not why I'm there for them. And it doesn't really play into my opinions of the game that hard, if, like, a Zelda game is noticeably easier or harder than another. Because, like, I'm there for the vibes. And if Yoshi's Story is kind of the same deal, then I can totally see why you'd like it. Because that game sure do be a vibe. Kind of a drama that would happen in the Smash community with, like, new character reveals. Where, like, a lot of the times people would assume that a new character being, like, revealed, that was kind of a lame pick. like Dark Pit or something, where it's like, why the heck did we need Pit in Dark Pit, but character I really liked didn't like it. And the real answer is that the clone characters, especially when they're very visually, like, almost identical characters, just take way less depth time to put in. That's basically them just being like, just take this because it took us like 2 seconds. And I can only assume that a lot of the, like, extra weird picks in this game are because of that.
And instead of it being seen as a courtesy, it's seen as a disservice.
Yeah. Although, in fairness, the ones in Mario Kart are, like, supremely goofy.
Yeah.
Compared to, like, the picks in Smash. Like, the picks in Smash are, like, at least clone characters that, like, feel on brand enough that it's like, would have preferred something cool, but there do be Dark Pit fans out there. But Pink Gold Peach was basically the poster child of, like, how did we even get here? I feel like I've always had, like, a weird fascination with Excite Bike, but I have zero reason to actually care about the game itself.
Yeah.
Or games, I guess.
No offense, Excite Bike, but you're not Excite.
I feel like I have more memories of just, like, messing around with it for 2 seconds in Animal Crossing, and that's where most of my charm of it comes in.
Same. It was more fun as a game in a game than as a game. Same with Balloon Fight, right? Whatever that one is.
Yeah, I forget where I saw it, if it was like a video or like something I read. But it was just kind of talking about the concept of how, like, NES games, like, in the modern... shit, that was bad. In the current, like, modern gaming landscape, actually work extremely well as, like, mini-games in a game like Animal Crossing. And it almost makes them, like, more appealing. That you're just, like, taking a second in your, like, slice-of-life game to play a little game like that. Instead of, like, using the brain power to, like, really sit down with a game like that. Because your expectations are just, like, different. And I think that's, like, actually a pretty good point. I think I'd care a lot more about most of my extremely positive memories about NES games come exclusively from playing them in Animal Crossing. And I think it's just, like, a better setting for them.
Yeah. And it's such a charming concept.
Right? Like, you have to just, like, earn them in your game.
Play them in your little house.
Yeah. It also just makes for a cool decoration for a house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's, like... I like decorating my house in games like Animal Crossing, but it's extremely cool and it feels like there's slightly more of a point like that. I will say, one thing that's, like, kind of funny is that I've arguably spent more time playing Sonic R than I have playing most of the Mario Kart games. Probably not more time. It's a really short game. That only takes so long to beat. But it's a game that I've played through a bunch, just because I have like a weird, very weird soft spot for it. And that game has like a Rainbow Road knockoff in it. But visually, it is so aggressively rainbowy that I'm always like underwhelmed by the amount of Rainbow Road.
This one especially is like a space station and
Yeah.
low saturation.
I'll see if I can find a video of it afterwards and like put a mild photosensitivity warning on it actually. Because it's kind of intense. But this is what this game does for Rainbow Road. So I'm a little bit underwhelmed anytime I see like how not quite as saturated the Rainbow Roads are in Mario Kart. Because my brain just always goes here. And this game, this is like comically RBG, like from top to bottom, a Rainbow Road.
It's almost ominous RBG though.
Yeah, no, it is pretty like dark and is scary.
It's a little menacing.
Yeah. It's like when the darker colors roll by, everything gets like really dark.
I like it, but it's also like also a different vibe.
Yeah. What sort of streamers do you usually watch? Do you have any channel recommendations? So honestly, I'm really bad at watching streamers a lot of the time. Or at the very least, I haven't really gone out of my way to like look into any streamers. So if there is any streamers I do know and have watched in the past, they're basically all people that I just actually know. Like my friend Poppin that I've talked about a couple of times and he pops into chat sometimes. My friend Kelefu I've talked about a couple of times and pops into chat sometimes. What's it called? Generally speaking, anybody who does stream, if they're like pretty active in my community at all, I'll try to at least pop in and say hi at some point or another, as long as I don't like completely miss out on every opportunity to do that. Because I don't know, a lot of the time streaming for me is very much just kind of like a hanging out and talking to the people I know kind of thing, which when I'm on the receiving end of that is kind of cheating because I know all of you and if you're talking, you're, you know, talking with all the people here and myself. But it makes it so I'm really bad at just kind of like seeking out random communities. And then bigger streamers are kind of like, oh my gosh, excuse me. Bigger streamers are kind of like impossible for me to get into. Like, you know, obviously there's a lot of particularly huge ones on Twitch that people like a lot. I think the closest thing there is to, okay, is this match starting? Or are the load times just that bad on Switch? Is that where they're playing from? The closest thing there is to a streamer that I like watching into from time to time that is a much bigger streamer, their name is Coney. And they're somebody from the Smash community. They've done a lot of like... Their main claim to fame is being a Smash commentator, but they do have a history of like being a competitive Smash player. But he's also just really funny. And I tend to like go back on his YouTube videos a lot because he'll tend to do like, you know, shortened recap VODs of streams where like he'll do like a segment and he'll have editors cut it down. And I tend to generally prefer watching them like that as opposed to watching them live because again, the appeal of watching live isn't quite as much there for me because I like interacting with the streamer if I'm going to be there. I like having conversations with them and that just like doesn't happen in a stream chat that's moving that fast. So I might as well just get to the part where I'm, you know, watching all the funny stuff that happened. Alright, welcome on in. Is this Gyro? It is, which I feel like every time I play a weird game with the, like I'm using like the Switch Gyro. I wish I had a way to visualize it. But every time I play a game like this with the Switch Gyro, I like have this moment of asking myself, like, am I the first one to do this? This is not how this game was meant to be played. But yeah, basically, to make a long story short, in like the past couple years, like I've always been like, I've never been a first-person shooter person because I've always been really bad with a controller, which is just a worse way to play shooters for pretty obvious reasons. And then I've just always hated playing basically any game with mouse and keyboard. And shooters were no exception, unfortunately. Even though, like, the handful of times I tried, I was like, wow, I can actually aim like this. But I just really don't like using mouse and keyboard for it. Just because I don't like using it for anything. And as time went on, it also became more of, like, an ergonomics issue, too. Where now I, like, physically just kind of don't want to use a mouse and keyboard for the sake of my wrists. Fair enough, the keyboard isn't designed to be a controller. It's a miracle it can even be used as one. Yeah, no, definitely. I'm amazed that people use them regularly, because as somebody who's, like, gone through carpal tunnel, I use one for 2 seconds and it hurts, like, a lot. So the thought of, like, somebody spending their entire gaming career using one, I'm like, no wonder you're getting carpal tunnel. That's cool. Yeah, no, it's just, I think what it was is I stumbled across a YouTube video that talked about the feature in Steam, and I already used a Switch Pro controller for everything, just because I'm not a huge fan of, like, the normal Xbox controller, and I come from playing a lot of stuff on Switch, so I'm just kind of like, if I'm playing anything on my computer, I might as well be using the same controller, and I'm already pretty wired for, like, the A on the right, B on the bottom. And then when I found out about the gyro, I was like, wow, I'm gonna play through a million games like this.